Hi Mum, you do everything for everyone else. Let me help you make your life easier. Quick, short information to make you empowered and remind you why you are so important. Because if you don't know what's on the menu, how can you choose what's right for you? Hi, I'm Elena, Director of my private practice Supportive Therapy. An everyday Aussie mum trying not to lose my biscuits and my kids. As a mental health professional, I'm here to share my secrets so no other mother feels alone or powerless. Knowledge is power, and I want you to be powerful. Think of it like I'm your mindset coach through all of this. Everything is backed by science and psychology. I believe in you, and I want you to be the best version of yourself. To be happy and feel in control, you need to be mentally strong. Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. My name's Elena, and today we're going to be talking about grief. So it can either be grief and loss or just this overwhelming sense of grief. So how it can just sometimes, if we don't even know it's there, how it can show up. We want to have a look at the evidence, and then if there has been something huge or traumatic or upsetting, how we can then recognize that in our children as well. So when we do think of grief and loss, we typically think of only experiences that when someone passes away. So the thing about grief is that can come up in the most unlikely scenarios. So feeling a certain way without understanding, so why all the emotions, right? And if we don't address it correctly or flow through the grief process, it can keep us stuck in an uncomfortable emotional state. They are the worst. This uncomfortable emotional state, it's like a buzz or a cloud or something that just won't let me be free. So some examples of grief and loss is during the breakdown of a marriage. So this is about our expectations. When we have expectations of having a child that doesn't match our reality, so that could even look like gender disappointment. The ending of a job role, so that could whether it be chosen or taken away from us, or a contract, or redundancy. Moving home, so even though moving home could be either contradictory, I'm moving to a home of my dreams in a perfect world when I win my lotto. Sometimes we then have grief about moving homes because of all the memories that we've had in the past with our previous home. So that unusual bittersweet thing. And even though you're meant to be happy about it, or even obviously if something does happen negatively in your life and you have to leave your dream home and downsize in a way that feels like it's been taken away from you, or even the threat of homelessness and living in your car because of the rental crisis. Absolute grief and loss. And then even having to share custody of your children. And as a mother, when we have children, we generally expect us to be there. And if we have instincts, our nurturing, when we don't have the full experience of our children all the time, every single day, when we're not always with them, and when we do have to share custody, sometimes it can just be this lingering grief. Because if it's a week on, week off, the week that's off, I might genuinely just miss them and grieve for them because I'm not around them the way that I would really want them to. And I wish that this had worked out just so that I could have been with them full time, okay? And then also if there are breakdowns in relationships and there are problems with the partner not being supportive, or they could be quite aggressive or not parent the way that we do, then there's that constant worry and grief about your children being raised with someone else that doesn't have the same ethics, values and morals that you do in terms of parenting, and then that grief then turns to hopelessness. Okay, so when we feel a situation is out of our control, when we experience an outcome that we weren't prepared for, or saying goodbye to a certain way of life as we know it, it obviously brings up a sequence of emotions to help us emotionally process this new change. So also to remember that if you are experiencing grief and loss, you cannot just get over it. It's impossible, no matter how many people tell you, okay? It's also about learning to manage the memories and emotions. So grief can be a reflection of the love that you had for that person, or the hope that you had for that relationship. Grief is like glitter. When you try and clean it all up, even after the event, you will still find glitter tucking in the corners. It will always be there. So people tend to believe that the feelings of grief shrink over time. But what really happens is that when we grow around our grief and implement our new coping strategies, we then grow so the feelings aren't that painful, the memories don't disturb us as much. And it's all about these memories, so how can we learn to manage our memories? So understanding as well that grief is a complex and individual experience that can impact women in a variety of ways. So while grief can be triggered by a range of experiences, so as we discussed before, such as the loss of a loved one, a divorce, a major life change, there are some common ways that grief can impact women. So number one, the emotional impact. So grief can cause a range of intense emotions such as sadness, anger, guilt, and anxiety. Women may also experience depression and mood swings. Hello, estrogen. Number two, physical impact. So grief can cause physical symptoms such as fatigue, insomnia, headaches, and loss of appetite. Women may also be at increased risk for both health problems such as heart disease or immune system dysfunction, even that autoimmune. So how? Because obviously if there's a lot of cortisol, a lot of adrenaline, and it's constant, this stress response, it can have physiological responses. Number three, there is a social impact. So grief can impact a woman's social relationships, as then she may withdraw from family or friends, struggle to connect with others, or feel isolated and alone. And if you've got that low mood, that depressive, I can't be bothered, what's the point, or even your friends, you can feel quite self-conscious. Oh gosh, she's sad again. It's awful when people keep on asking you how you are and you don't have anything positive to say. And then you get anxiety because your friends are like, how are you? And then you know it's been like the 8th time they've asked you in the past 2 months and you still have nothing positive. And then you're like, well, they're eventually going to stop. I don't want to answer that question anymore because I don't feel good. I don't have something positive. So then you either avoid that situation altogether or you feel you have to put on that brave face and go, yeah, everything's fine. It's not fine, honey, okay? Number 4 is professional impact. So grief can impact a woman's professional life because as hard as it is for a mum, especially with young kids, to try and have that elusive work-life balance. I think they call it the work-life, I forget what that word is now. Anyways, so she may struggle to focus on work or to make decisions and then may take time to grieve. So it's really difficult because if I don't have a work-life balance, especially if I am a single mum or we're struggling financially and everything is dependent on my paycheck at the end of the week, if I'm not performing well at work because my brain is not being cooperative with me because it's in grief mode, then I'm not able to function at my capacity, and then there may be really dire consequences, which are absolutely awful. Number 5, cultural impact. Grief can be influenced by cultural beliefs and expectations. So this may even impact how a woman experiences and expresses her grief. So because of your cultural beliefs, we may have been taught that X, Y, and Z, or it's not allowed, or something happens. So then even if instinctually you want to be able to grieve or express or explore, if I've been taught growing up or my family around me or my religion or my cultural beliefs that this is the correct way to do it and anything outside of that box is incorrect, then that can also really negatively impact the process for me to going through the authentic grief process into my acceptance. So from a child and parenting perspective, grief can be a difficult and confusing experience for children. If it's hard for adults, imagine what it's like for kiddos, okay? Who may have a limited understanding of death and loss, because it's not like I'm going to voluntarily tell my kids at an early age about death and loss if I don't really have to. Obviously, you have to, it's one of those things, but it's not something that I really prioritize and want to speak about all the time. So for families like me that have this perspective, which is okay, if children or children don't even have pets or animals, and they don't know what death or grief and loss is, it can be extremely hard to fathom. So children may experience grief in a variety of ways. So depending on their age, their personality, their relationships to the person that has died. So here are some common ways that grief may present in children. So number one, behavioural changes. So children may exhibit changes in behaviour, so such as acting out, becoming more withdrawn or clingy, or even experiencing difficulties sleeping or eating. And it's really difficult with this if I'm already dealing with this, and it's hard for me to be able to soothe my behaviour or feel like I'm in control of my body. When your child or children, if you have a few of them, their behaviour's gone haywire, it can almost feel impossible because I can't be there for them because I'm not even there for myself. Number two, emotional changes. So children may experience a range of intense emotions such as sadness, anger, guilt, and anxiety. Sometimes, obviously, kids don't know what anxiety is, but it can also present as I've got a sick tummy, I've got a headache, I don't feel well. And you're like, geez, what did you eat? It's anxiety because it's in your tummy. They may also struggle with mood swings or emotional outbursts. And that's because as well, children aren't really capable of self-soothing. They need someone to help regulate with them. That's that co-regulation. So then when they do have those emotional outbursts or mood swings, they need that adult to help them regulate and teach them that it's okay. Everything's fine. Getting back down off that cliff, okay? Number three is physical changes. So children may experience physical symptoms such as headaches, stomach aches, or fatigue. And that also goes out hand in hand with anxiety, as spoken to before. Number four is regression. Younger children may regress to earlier stages of development, such as bedwetting or clinging to a favourite toy. Could also be back to the dummy or even the babbles or the childlike language. And this can be really upsetting and frustrating for a parent, because if I've gotten out of the bedwetting stage, as hard as that was and as exhausting as that was, and I feel like I'm on the straight and narrow and I'm free, and the next thing you know, it started all over again, it can make you feel like everything is crumbling down and how am I going to do this, and I don't have, it's really difficult. And then imagine what it's like for them. Even if they are little, they are embarrassed, they are humiliated, they don't know what's going on, they are really confused. It's like no one chooses to wet the bed. Number five, school performance. Children may experience difficulty or concentrating. They may even have a decline in academic performance. So, depending on our expectations of our children at school, if we have made them feel like you are only worthy if you get high grades, when they start to have a decline in academic performance because of this emotional toll, the additional pressures because you don't love me unless I get a good score can then add pressure because that then falls into worthiness. So that's then two beasts that I have to try and manage now. And then that's the not good enough thing, and then the loneliness and isolation thing, and then no one understands me thing, okay? Number six, social changes. So children may struggle to connect with others or may even withdraw from social situations, which is unusual for kids because you think they're social. So even if your instincts are telling you that's unusual, they normally always go over their cousins and they don't want to. There's a reason. Maybe just sitting down on the carpet and talking to them. What's been going on? Number seven, questioning and curiosity, right on the money. So children may ask questions about death and may exhibit a heightened curiosity about the afterlife. So if you and your partner are together or even separated, it's good to understand what the other person may be discussing to your children. Because if they're conflicting ideas about death or the afterlife, it can put a lot more pressure and a lot more confusing, and then it actually causes distrust. So understanding as well, what messages are we sending? What do they need? And what does everyone want to be able to get on the same page? Okay? It's important for adults to acknowledge and validate children's feelings of grief. They're having a harder time than we are, and to provide age-appropriate explanations and support. And even age-appropriate explanations, even if you don't have the words, even if you go to the public library and see if there's any books that can kind of help you, and then that's the words for you. Easy, right? So there are 5 different emotions that we transition through. The funny thing is, the rules about the grief and loss, there are no rules. We can experience them in any order. There is no set duration for each stage. The varied intensities, and we can encounter one phase more than once. So it's really confusing because we think this should be something structured, the 5 stages of grief, but really we're humans. We're all completely different and we're all experiencing it differently. So understanding our expectations and pressures on ourselves, and then realizing that in grief and loss, even though there are inflexible rules about the 5 stages, there are no rules. So this will all keep repeating unless the concern has been resolved in our minds and our emotions have processed our feelings to make sense of the new reality. So this isn't in any order, but it will be numbered 1 to 5 so it's easier to remember. So the first one is denial. So denial, as I've spoken about before, is a survival mechanism which keeps us emotionally safe. If we are in denial about a particular situation happening, then we are still able to function out of our quote-unquote normal capacity. We are still able to focus on daily tasks without thinking too much about what's causing us grief. Number 2 is bargaining. This is when you reflect upon the situation and analyze if you could have done something different to alter the outcome. Some examples are, if I only tried harder, I wish I had stood up for myself more, I would do anything to give them back. And then if I'm religious, it can be begging your chosen God or belief system to answer your prayers. Dear God, I'll be this person if you give me this back. So that's bargaining. Number 3 is anger. Anger as to why this is happening to you. Anger at the people around you that are treating you this way. Anger about the injustice. Anger that nothing goes right in your life. Anger at yourself because you wish you could have done things differently. So this anger can show up in many different ways because sometimes it's displaced anger. So have you heard that saying, you take the things out on the people closest to you? So if you have been numb or in denial for some times, then sometimes it can present as a rage haze. I don't know if you've heard that term before, rage haze, where it feels like everything is too much and then there's a huge explosion and then you just snap, right? But because it's a haze, you don't actually remember what's going on. And it's difficult for women because sometimes societally, does that make sense? From a young age, as little girls, don't get angry. Anger is aggressive. You're not allowed to show that emotion. So if anger is number 3 in our grief and loss, but I don't have a good relationship with anger and I don't know what that looks like or how to express that emotion because it was always wrong for me to be angry, then it's really difficult because then it can show up as like irritation or frustration or irrational something, okay? And then obviously depending on the anger, where you're feeling it and your relationship with anger, it can be irrational and some sensations of like a blackout. So number 4 is depression. So this depression is actually feelings of sadness about what is happening. It can be longing for the way that things were, or even a desire for people to come back in your life again. Depression's awful. So this depression and sadness can feel like overwhelming fatigue, carrying on without addressing the grief, and can lead to psychological burnout and exhaustion. It can have profound effects on our mood and how we process our current situation, and impacts our hope about the future and what the future actually looks like for us. This depression can also be intertwined with a fear of the unknown, feeling like we are so overwhelmed with the things being out of control that it's almost like we shut down emotionally. So, now, the good news after all that doom and gloom. Number 5 is acceptance and forgiveness. So this is acceptance of the current situation as it is and learning to live in your new reality. And when I say forgiveness, it's about forgiving yourself for how you treated yourself, for how you spoke to yourself, for the perception of yourself. So even though people say about forgiveness, from my perspective, it's about forgiving yourself. So being compassionate to yourself, being kind to yourself about the turmoil you have been experiencing, giving yourself a break, almost like a little sense of peace, because you have had the time and space to process what has happened in your own way. So when this happens, it can also lead to the way of feeling in control over your own life again. So when we think with grief, sometimes it's just forgetting and move on and just get over it. But it's not. It's quite complex. So it's about learning your new reality, addressing your underlying feelings, and giving yourself permission to process what's happening in your own time. And grief is like a glitter bomb. Remember? No matter how much you try and clean it up, it will always be there, somewhere. And if you've got little girls with a whole lot of glitter, you know exactly what that's like. So your success and happiness will lie in how you flow through these 5 stages. And then you will come out the other side stronger and then in control again. And obviously, I believe in you. You are really important. And it's really nice to be patient through this process and understanding what it's like for you. And sometimes, even if you were listening to this and you didn't realize that you were in a grief and loss process because it wasn't a death, it wasn't obvious grief and loss, then it can give me a sense of control because I now know why my body's doing what it is. So I want to thank you everyone for coming and listening to me today. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out. If you have any suggestions about what you would like to hear in the future, but otherwise be really careful and patient with yourself. Thank you again. Have a lovely day. Bye. If you're hearing this message, you've listened to the entire podcast, and for that, I would like to thank you for your support. So you can find me on Instagram or Facebook at supportivetherapy_, and then you can find heaps of free resources online at www.supportivetherapy.com.au. So if today you did find my information useful, please leave a review and subscribe. By leaving a review, it's a value exchange. It's good karma. So I value your support just as much as you value my free information. And if you liked it, other mums can like it as well, hopefully, and then we can hopefully start a huge movement of people valuing mothers the way that they need to be valued. So please feel free to let me know what topics you would like to see in future episodes. Always feel free to get in touch with me in the comments. Otherwise, follow me on Supportive Therapy social media networks. Thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful day, you beautiful mum.